humans were born to squat, for example, right? Like we just need to help facilitate or guide people back into those movements that we were born to have.
Welcome to the Flow State Yoga for Athletes podcast. I'm your host, Dan Rosenak, lifelong student athlete, here to share with you interesting discussions featuring athletes and coaches exploring health and human performance, yoga, and flow state awareness. I hope this show helps us all access our highest potential. Thank you and enjoy the journey. Welcome, Jason Brown, Iron Kimono, to the Flow State Yoga Therapy for Athletes podcast. Jason is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo. He is a Qigong instructor and high-level practitioner. We're going to talk a lot about some great topics. So welcome to podcast. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the love.
So what does flow state mean to you?
That's a great question. It's funny because I was just reading a book by a gentleman named Todd Hargrove. I don't know if you know Todd Hargrove, but I had these books as well. But he mentioned me, the Polish researcher behind Csikszentmihalyi and flow and the flow state. And I think flow state is just being 100% absorbed and present in what you are doing. There's no like when I teach my play based workshops and my movement workshops, we do a lot of things that are task based and challenging, but not overly challenging. And at the end of that little task, I'll ask individuals, I'll be like, what were you thinking about when we were doing this? And I was thinking about doing this. Yes, that's the point. You weren't thinking about your mortgage. You weren't thinking about car insurance. You weren't thinking about Interstate 95 South on the way to the airport or any of that, right? You were fully present and aware of what you had to accomplish, and you're enjoying yourself in that present moment. So to me, that is what flow state is.
I love that. And the idea of absorption, I really connect with that.
Yeah.
Do you think it has to do something with this connection point between difficulty and skill?
Yes, I do. I think it needs to be challenging enough to challenge, right? To stimulate. People can't be bored. They have to be engaged. But if it's overly challenging, I think that sometimes they check out and they think, I've seen this with my sons in some skills. I've seen this with adults that maybe don't want to challenge themselves physically or stimulate themselves mentally with a new task. And I'm sure you've seen this. Just give me the exercise. I don't want to think. I don't want to do any of the planning on my own. I don't want to do any of the designing on my own. Just tell me 3 sets of 10 and what to do, and I'll do it. So I think there is a fine balance between stimulating and challenging enough to keep people engaged and aware and awake. But if it becomes too much, it's it can it can be too much and people will back away from it as well.
Right.
That's why I like to use simple tools. I don't know about your practice much, Dan. You and I have only worked together once before, but like simple tools like a tennis ball. Like everybody knows what a tennis ball is, right? It's familiar. Everybody knows what that is. But it bounces in a way that is completely novel on each task. So you and I, we can be doing, throwing back and forth. We could be bouncing back and forth. And we know the response that we get from the tennis ball, but it's different enough on each bounce, on each throw on it, that it provides a little bit of stimulus. So I say novel, but familiar. And I think that is the balance, how we need for flow state.
Love that. Novel but familiar. Now, a lot of your work involves this idea of play and creativity in the training relationship.
Yes.
You talk more about that work and kind of your approach and how you think about play and creativity and perhaps how does that apply to this idea of creating flow?
I think play is the ultimate flow. And I would be willing to sit down with anybody and argue that because you're a father, I'm a father. I see it in the old so every day at noon I teach a Tai Chi Qigong class. And it's a very open, accessible class. And when you and I did the Qigong workshop together, I said the verb that they use for Tai Chi and Qigong is actually play. It's a light, open, accessible class. And there's no friction, right? There's no friction and people are free to create their own movements. I say if there's 20 people there, there should be 20 different expressions of that same form. There we go with the novel, but familiar also. So if I teach you this one form, everybody knows that form, but Dan is going to do that form differently than Jason, and Jason's going to do it differently than Jennifer, right? So I think play is the deepest flow state that we can have. I think all creation happens within a play state. I don't think it's hard. I just read a great quote and I never heard it before. If it's fun, it gets done.
Mm.
So I always use the one, and you being a father, I'm sure you have many memories like this as well. I was repairing the deck in my backyard in my strength garden. I was repairing the deck. And my 3-year-old at the time was doing the same activity as I was. So I had the stare and I was hammering and measuring and I was working. He was playing, although it was the same activity. So play is a state. It's not necessarily an activity. It's your relationship with the activity that's taking place. Your relationship with the tennis ball, your relationship with your jujitsu partner, your relationship with whatever, clay, mud, pencils, whatever medium we're using, play is the state. And I think most creation, if not all creation, takes place within a play state.
I love that. It's the relationship to the activity.
It's not the activity itself. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Because you could be playing like if you never touched cement before and you're over there and you're playing with cement, but I'm working and I'm like, I'm so sick of this job. Right? Why did I go to school? Why did or whatever, right? You could be playing with this new material you never played with before. And then I'm over here working. Same activities, but it's our relationship with those materials.
There is a story that my yoga professor, Dr. Bob Butera, has shared countless, at least several handfuls of times. It's this old kingdom was destroyed and conquered, and the new emperor makes everybody become stonemasons to repair the rubble and build a new palace. And somebody interviews 3 workers, and the first worker says, I'm this is unjust. I'm just getting my money to go home and take care of my family. The next one says, yeah, I'm doing my best, trying to make my living here. And then the third one says something like, can't you see? I'm an artist.
Yeah.
I'm Alice. No. It's the relationship to the work. Or the
Yes.
activity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this idea of like how we relate to what we do informs our inner experience, right?
Totally. Totally. Yes. And I'm glad you used that word art in that story because I'm not sure if we spoke about this before, Dan. Do you know what the word art means? Or like the etymology of the word art? I'm
I would
sure.
love to learn it.
So like, where two bones form, what is that called?
A joint.
Join. Give me an A word. Like if you and I can't put 2 words together, what do we say? I can't articulate art.
Articulation, right.
What is this?
Articulation,
Yeah. So the word art means a connection.
connection,
So
yeah.
that third example that you gave when the gentleman was building the palace, I'm an artist. Yeah. He is
Yeah,
connected it with that work,
right.
right? So that's the thing, like very much similar to yoga. Like the word yoga means to join or to yoke, like our English word. Art, the word art is exactly the same thing. You and I articulate our ideas. We put the ideas together. Two joints or two bones are articulating. And art is just our connection, very much like play, with that material, with our that action even.
To create something new.
Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Just to link with it, just to be connected to it.
Yeah. So where did your journey into this space begin? How would you chart your arc of self-development and learning and
I
articulation?
Yeah. I don't know. I've always been I I always think about this, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Dan. It's not like you didn't choose it. It chose you, right? So like I grew up in the woods and the mountains of eastern Pennsylvania, and I remember just playing in the woods and the things that attract me now are those things that attracted me then. I never sat down and said, I want to be a martial artist. Like I wanted to be a ninja.
Mm,
Right? And I
right.
watched kung fu theater when I was young and I martial arts spoke to me. I wasn't like I never searched anything out, but it was present, right? It was in us. I don't know if you believe in the idea of archetypes, but I think we do have these like inner archetypes. And I'm like, that artist, I actually use a hyphen. It's probably inappropriate, but it's all right. I use warrior artist, very much like scholar warrior.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. This archetype um, is one that I connect with too. Scholar, warrior.
Yep.
I have been reading this book you recommended, Scholar Warrior. I'm going to try to get there. It is by Deng Ming Dao.
Yes.
Uh,
He's a very good author.
it really is cool the way like the lifestyle is emphasized. Like these Eastern systems, which I would like for you to talk about more because you know more than I do about
I don't.
the lineages. I'm sure, but
I'm just a scholar myself. I'm just a student myself.
we're just learning, right?
Yes, yes.
It's this idea of a comprehensive approach to the holistic living for growth, for learning, for maximizing our potential as humans, and like that seems to be the goal more than mastering this the subtleties of some specific sword art or martial art in itself. It's like that's not it alone. It's you have to be a good person. You have to have good relationships. You have to have a good relationship with yourself. You have to be I think be curious and
Yeah.
um, you know be scholarly, read, create. Multidimensionality, I think, is my biggest takeaway from this book.
Yes. And if you
Yeah.
read the samurai traditions, the Japanese traditions, as opposed to those Chinese traditions, samurai, there was no line between artist and warrior. Like the samurai were expected to know their martial skills, like sword work and spear work and jujitsu, aikijitsu, whatever you want to call it. But
Mhm.
they were also supposed to, expected to be poets and calligraphy and tea ceremonies and knot tying and everything else, right? There was no delineation between here's a fighter and here's an artist. It's like if you are one of these, you are both of these. That's the way it is. You need this to balance that.
Yeah. So it seems to me that this system that's described in the book Scholar Warrior in the Chinese tradition is very, very similar to the classical yoga tradition, the yoga philosophy and lifestyle, the eight limbs,
Yes,
Patanjali codified. I mean, they could be overlaid directly.
totally. I think a lot of these ancient traditions could. I think if you look at and again, Tai Chi, Qigong, Scholar Warrior, that would be Chinese or whatever. But the Japanese traditions, same thing, right? Yoga traditions, same thing. Indian traditions for sure. And I'm sure if we went to Eastern Mongolia somewhere, they have that same tradition also, or South American uh indigenous folks, they probably have very Native Americans, right? I'm sure indigenous North Americans. I'm sure had look, if you were a warrior, you were still a painter. And
Yes.
and you still could probably play music and dance really well and all those things that are considered art and artistic and you know
Mhm.
I'm sure you did both. I'm sure you danced around that fire just as well as you could fight.
Cultivated dance cultivates the chi, right? And we have
Yes.
so okay. So when I initially connected with you for um, the Qigong creative seminar, which was awesome,
Thank you.
you talked about the Chinese characters for Qigong.
Yes.
Can you say more about that? I love the way that you describe that.
So I don't know much about it, Dan, to be completely honest. I only know what my mentors have shared with me. So from my understanding, and it's hard to see visually, maybe you could put that in the show notes or something, Dan, but it's an image of rice
Yes.
in steam. And
Okay.
it's the steam that is transforming the rice in, alchemy. They always use this word alchemy, which is very interesting. Of that steam, that gas, because sometimes chi is actually translated as gas into something that is more, I don't know if usable is the right word, but digestible. What trying to say?
Absolutely.
It's
To
really
be
cool.
able to be assimilated into the body for
Oh, that's
energy.
great. Yes,
Right?
that's great. Yes. Yeah. That letter for Scholar Warrior, I'm not sure if he speaks about it in that book, but the character for Scholar and the character for Warrior is the same character.
Right.
It's she.
Chi.
She Yeah. So it's like again, going back to your point, there's no hard line between Warrior, Scholar. It was same thing. Same
Same pair.
same archetype, yeah.
Yeah. And I think of, my work with athletes as a yoga therapist, um, you know, as scholar warriors. Like it is the same path.
Yeah.
Athletic development is the scholar warrior path, is the artist's path.
It is.
Yeah.
I always play around. I don't know if this happens to you, Dan, but like being an entrepreneur yourself, you probably bounce a million ideas around in your head all day long. And my wife says, just knock it off. But you can't knock it off, right? Because this is what we are.
Yeah.
And that I really like hyphenated things like warrior artist or
Yeah.
iron kimono. Like I love those things. And I love that it's almost like opposites. But I always think like when you train your athletes, I always had a desire to create a program called Poet Athlete.
Mm.
Like Poet Warrior, I'm not sure you've heard Poet Warrior. That's a big brand. Uh, Poet Athlete. I was like, yeah. So what? They're athletes. They're playing lacrosse, but guess what? That's poetry in motion, my friend. That is beautiful movement. That is beautiful art right there taking place. You're also a poet.
Mhm. Mhm. I
Poet
want to
athlete.
connect another. I love that poet athlete. You should trademark that one.
Yeah. I have too many trademarks that I've never acted on. Seriously. And
Which
good
would
for names. I think I have 400 domain names. And I'm like, I'm paying for all these domain names that I'm not even using.
So what is it? Tell us more about what your work looks like and what you um, really try to cultivate with the folks you work with.
Great question. Thank you, Dan. So my work is really open, accessible, and free. Like I really try not to be, it's going to sound so weird. I really try not to be like a coach. I try to be more of a guide and say or this word is important, I think, facilitator. Like because you and I know this. We have humans were born to squat, for example, right? Like We just need to help facilitate or guide people back into those movements that we were born to have. It's the
Mm,
same with play. We were born players. That those toddler years as a human, they're the most educational years of our lives from a movement perspective, but also like an environmental perspective, social cognitive perspective. And there was no coaching involved, right? There was no put your feet here, point your toes there, sit back with your hips, load this, load that, brace your core, don't brace your core. But that's what we learned. So I try to model and guide people into better movement and better performance and better play, but not being not I don't like to be the I not to talk down on anyone, but I think sometimes in our field, the practice is coach centric,
yeah.
right? It's like the coach is the center of the attention.
Mm,
Whereas I think the athlete or the mover or the client, student, whatever you want to call them, they should be the center, right? So those practices should be athlete focused, play focused, movement focused, and not so coach centric, if that makes
mm,
sense. So I try to get out of the way. I try to model. I will give people play based activities to sort of elicit the type of movement that I'm looking for. I try to keep the sessions light, open, accessible for everyone. The three-step model that I used, and I'm not sure if we spoke about this in Qigong, but I do speak about it often online. And there's a gentleman named Alfred North Whitehead. You would really love his writing, Alfred North Whitehead. And one of his most famous articles is called The Rhythmic Claims of Discipline and Freedom.
mm,
So Taoist, right? The rhythmic claims of discipline and freedom. I may have that off by a word or two, but that's the basic idea. And his educational model consisted of three things. He uses so more modern people changed the words a little bit, but it was play.
mm,
So he get this, Dan, this is so good, right? Like this is old language that is so beautiful. Romance. So his first stage of education was romantic. You had to become romantic. You had to fall in love with the activity that you wanted to learn. So romance. Second stage was precision.
mm,
And then the third stage was play.
mm,
But within the article, he talks about it could actually be play, precision, play. So
mm,
as toddlers, we play with our movement. We see something on the floor that we want, we squat to pick it up in beautiful form, right? That's play. We're not training. We're not practicing. I mean, we are practicing, and play is the highest form of practice, but it's not, systemized or, codified or whatever. So we play, and then, but if you really want to be good at something, there is a precision stage,
mhm,
right? So being a grappler yourself, jiu-jitsu player, we warm up with the play. You and I roughhouse. We do we're just roughhousing. We're just playing. We're just warming up, right? That is the play. That's the first stage. Then precision. Dan, I really want to get good at this this cross side arm lock. So then you and I need to spend a little bit of time in that precision stage. But then after you and I spend time there in that stage, in that second stage, then we can play more. But we can play at a deeper level because we spent a little bit of time in that precision stage. Does that make sense?
absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. So in soccer, I think they say enthuse, instruct, play. Enthuse,
Mm,
instruct, play. I don't think that's used here in the US. I think other people use it. And then I always here's another one of those ideas that bounce. I love play, precision, play. His was I think the terms he actually used was romance, precision, and then generalization.
mm,
But I like freedom, fidelity, and then freedom. So freedom, you and I have the freedom to play around with the forms, right? And then fidelity, we are loyal to the forms. We are, this is the form. This is the things that we have to stay loyal to, that mechanic, this mechanic, that mechanic. But then once we understand those mechanics, right? Very Bruce Lee, right? Like a punch was just a punch until it's no longer just a punch, all that stuff. So I really like freedom, fidelity, freedom. But I don't know, it's just one of those ideas. But Alfred North Whitehead, the rhythmic claims of discipline and freedom. And he says all through life, you're going to see these undulating waves of like more precision, less precision and more play, more precision, less play. It doesn't matter if it's English, Latin, Spanish, Portuguese, Qigong, Tai Chi, Jiu-Jitsu. That's the way humans learn.
That is profound. I mean, that could transform coaching, sports, parenting, education.
Yes.
It is, we're, I feel that this is fair to say, is a generalization. In our culture, we tend to be result driven and externally motivated. And
Yes.
that's those things to me would kind of indicate um, losing sight of the playing aspect.
Yes. Yeah. And Dan, Dave have actually done studies. This is so interesting, right? So if you they did it with adults and with children. If I can find these studies, I will send them your way. But like the researcher was in the room and the researcher gave a task or a problem to be solved, right? And everybody was having a good time trying to solve the problem, blah, 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 blah. Mood was good, energy was good, playful, creative, all that stuff. Researcher came back in and provided an extrinsic reward. Like the team that gets this done will get whatever carrot, right? Money, chocolate, whatever. And it took the fun out of them trying to solve that puzzle, right?
Right. Yeah.
Just
I mean,
providing that external thing, that external reward.
yeah. I'm thinking about jiu-jitsu training with partners who are less ego driven and more playful and loose. It's such a different experience, right? Than training with somebody who wants to win the roll or wants to finish the move in a certain way. It's like there's this one purple belt I train with, and he's so he wants to be playful. He wants to be have an exchange with me. Who's I'm a double strong white belt. Like I don't have the experience he does, but when we roll like that, we both learn from each other when we give each other space to respond, answer. And do you find that in your experience in the training that you've had?
Yes. So one thing, Dan, that I think if if I could have more time with younger grapplers, I would recommend they do judo before they actually do jujitsu because I think the culture is a little better, to use a word, because judo actually has tenets, right?
Mm,
And one of the tenets is mutual benefit,
mm,
right? And one of the best educations I ever received was at a YMCA at Broad Street, Broad and Arch in Philadelphia, and it was the Philadelphia Judo Club, Liberty Bell Judo Club, and not. I'm sorry, I think it was called the Philadelphia Judo Club. It was Philadelphia, yeah. But I was like clueless at that time. I was a jujitsu player, but my stand up work was pitiful.
When was this? Give us a ballpark.
Late '90s, maybe.
Okay.
Late '90s and then early 2000s, something like that. Dan, these mats were horrible, absolutely horrible. Ronnie and Ray and a gentleman named John DeSimone I think he bought Steve Maxwell's original academy on Chestnut. But the cultures, these people were totally more skilled than me,
Mm,
but they allowed me to play in a way that was beneficial to them. So they would throw me, but right at the last second, they would pull me up. Right. So
mm,
I wasn't making contact with the mats as hard as they could throw me. Right. So mutual benefit is one of the tenets of judo, which I really love. Like it allowed them to explore and play with their maybe a new form that they were working on with the new guy who's clueless, but also the way that didn't hurt me. There were so many I remember the instructor. There was a Japanese player, Yashushi was his name. He was incredible. And I could see I'm pretty observant, right? I could see the eye contact between the Japanese player and the American instructor. And I'm a pretty big guy. I'm like 220 pounds. And here's this little Japanese guy killing me. But they were doing it in a way to help me improve my break falls and my falling and my rolling. And it was such a great education because I picked up on it and I knew that they were trying to improve me and help improve me as a player. And he got to work on skills that he necessarily couldn't do with a better player, right? And I'm not sure if this is true in all dojos or judo schools, but they had a beautiful phrase and they said, smiling Randori. So
Mm.
it's smiling Randori. Like if you're not having a good time doing Randori, you're doing it wrong. Now, would that be completely different? If you're, we're speaking at the time of the Olympics, yeah, maybe sometimes you would have to go back into that precision stage, right? And be like, all right, we're going to really do 1,000 reps on this one thing. But for the most part, for the recreational player, smiling Randori is the way to do it.
So I want to learn more about your martial arts. You
Yeah.
mentioned Steve Maxwell. One of
Yes.
my kids trained with Steve Maxwell back in the day at Maxercise too. Joe Chiccarone.
Yes, I know Joe. That's where Joe and I actually met. Yes.
Yeah. So what was that like? I mean, for the folks who don't know who Steve Maxwell is and what is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, maybe the folks who started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the Gracie family, came to the East Coast through Steve Maxwell. Is that true?
He had the first Jiu-Jitsu academy on the East Coast prior to even a Gracie being on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Enzo came to New York later, and Enzo had some students also in Philadelphia, but Steve was the first academy on the East Coast.
What
And
was it like?
I'm
Yeah.
sure Uncle Joe, everybody that trained with Steve back in those days, it's just so nostalgic. It's
Yeah.
just so beautiful. We feel so blessed that we had that opportunity. It was like that was that romantic stage, Dan. We were all in love with this crazy thing that came up from Brazil, right? And you're like, you're telling me that I could do this and choke you? Yeah, okay, let's go. Right? It was really the romantic stage in my life of learning how to grapple. And I think everybody, Joe and I'm not sure. I know you trained with Randy. I'm not sure if Randy actually trained with Steve at all. Um, but there's still a lot of these old school Philadelphia folks that came up under Steve's guidance, and I haven't met one that doesn't look back on those days as like nostalgic, you know?
Were the Migleries brothers involved in that gym?
Yeah,
The
so
Bound?
Ricky was a blue belt when I joined up, and Phil was a purple. And at that time, purple belts were like gods. It's
Yeah.
like they were incredible. Yeah, so Phil was a purple, and Phil did a lot of the teaching. And Ricky was a blue. He was a killer then. And yeah, they were both there and very, very much involved.
I had a chance to go to the Hoist Gracie seminar at Balance in Fishtown last year
Yes.
with Joe and his son and another Laura Aiken, one of the gym owners. Such a treat. I mean, like, but it's like a different era, like you were on like the first wave of this new thing that was like, it's now a global phenomenon, right? What
Yeah.
was that like? I mean, you speak about nostalgia, but did you have a sense at the time, like, oh, this is an important thing that's happening, or was it just that romance phase?
I don't think anybody there anticipated the growth of the art. And at that point, quite honestly, a lot of it was still self-defense based. Right. Right. Like Steve taught straight up the Gracie combatives curriculum, like bump and roll, punch block series, all of that. That was all like Um, I don't think any of us really understood how big it would become. I mean, now if you go downtown Philadelphia, there's probably what, 60 schools maybe. I mean, I'm in a tiny little suburb. You and I are in a tiny little suburb. There's 10 10 here,
Yeah.
right? It is, and I think I attribute the growth of jujitsu, quite honestly, to that playful. I mean, we say, I don't know if you use it, but I say I'm a jujitsu player.
Yeah.
I don't say I'm a jujitsu fighter because I'm not. I play jujitsu, right? Like I roughhouse with other adults,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
In judo, I say I'm a judo player. I play judo. That's I'm a player. And if it's at the moment it stops being play, I'll probably stop that activity. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool. What is your personal practice like these days? You mentioned your strength garden. What do
Yeah.
you do? Strength garden. What is your
Literally,
personal
I play, then I
what
practice, and then I play again. Yeah. So
are you working on? What's
I'm not working on anything at this point, Dan. I'm really
yeah.
not. Well, that's not true. I do I have a love hate with pull-ups. And I'm
Mm.
a bigger guy, I'm 220, and I hate pull-ups, but I love pull-ups because if you're 220 and maybe have a little bit of a dad bod, it's hard to do pull-ups, right?
A lot of working moves.
And so I do work on my pull-ups. I'm very focused on pull-ups because I do want to um, have a good number and have good form. But I actually enjoy that movement also. So I have a lot of different pulling weird handles, which are very excellent for grapplers, like thick handles, and then like ball attachments that we can grip like in a
Mm.
large wishbone type of attachment. So I do, if you're going to say I'm working on anything, it would be body weight exercises in the pulling fashion. But anything else, it's just to make this body feel better and so I can get through the day with my boys and with other people. I'm not working on anything too deep. And if something doesn't feel right, Dan, I move on.
Yeah.
Like, oh, nah, I'm not feeling that today. We have so
You're-
many options available to us now. It's like, why would I do this kettlebell? I mean, you could argue, yeah, be disciplined and if you want to make progress and reach your goals, but quite honestly, Dan, that's not where I am now in my practice. I just want to enjoy my own movements, enjoy my own body, and to go back to your original question, flow. Like, if I can get into those states and those meditative states with a rope, I will use a rope that day. If I can get into that meditative state with a kettlebell, I will use a kettlebell that day. I'm not I'm not married to anyone, and if it just involves a walk with the dogs, that's fine with me also.
yeah. The importance of variation.
Yes. Yeah.
You spend a decent amount of time with kettlebell training.
Yes.
Can you talk about that experience a little bit? I mean, kettlebells are still pretty popular in gyms and fitness communities. I don't
My
know.
first exposure came from Steve.
Really?
Yeah. Steve had these that's another benefit of coming up in that era because we were exposed to things that are pretty common now, but were not common then.
Mm.
I'll just give like 4 or 5 examples. Sandbags. Steve had sandbags. Steve had clubs. Steve had uh, gymnastics rings. Like
Mm.
I never saw a gymnastic ring in any gym, and I trained. I was a Marine. There were no gymnastics rings. We did pull-ups on pull-up bars. One thing, bar, right? So maybe you could do chin-ups, but you weren't doing any type of neutral grip work or anything. Steve had rings. Steve had a pull-up bar suspended from chains. It was really cool. So if you tried to do like pull-ups, the chain would sway. And like if you had like, I remember we had a competition once, Dan. And in my pull-ups, I was pretty young. I think I had like, maybe 16, 18, 20 pull-ups in me. And in the competition, we had to use the pull-up bar that was attached to the chains, and I got like 6. I was like, it just took all my pull-ups away. They're gonna have that love-hate with pull-ups. But, sandbags, and I'm talking real sandbags, like canvas sandbags, like nothing was commercially available. So we had sea bags from the military that were filled with sand, duct taped closed, right? And kettlebells. I remember walking up the stairs once and there was a ball, and I had these. I am the custodian. I think that's the term that they give to me now. A custodian of these kettlebells. It was a ball bearing, like a metal a ball bearing steel with a steel handle welded onto it. I'll send you a picture.
I would love to see that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. And they're not the most ergonomically well designed, but for swings and cleans, it's you can get the work done. One's like 53, the other one's like 57. They're not symmetrical whatsoever. But I am now the proud custodian of these kettlebells. But my first introduction to kettlebells was through Steve.
Amazing.
And Steve
And
was originally responsible for much of the curriculum that's present within the kettlebell world, specifically Pavel's camps. If you're going to go to Pavel's camps, like Strong First or even remnants of the RKC, the windmill was not. That was Steve's edition. Turkish get-ups was Steve's edition. Pavel had
really,
swings and clean and press and clean and jerk and snatches, but through Steve's guidance, Pavel added the windmills. Pavel added the Turkish get-ups.
really,
Bench press.
I that is a fascinating nugget of information right there.
Yeah.
And for the record, for folks who don't know who Steve Maxwell is, I think you can look him up. He's a ranked trainer in Men's Health, in one of those lists.
Yeah.
One of the top trainers in the world. That many people probably don't even know, but
They don't know. And I made a post on Instagram a few weeks ago. A lot of these young trainers do not know the originators of many of these things, like that gentleman Vern Gambetta that I spoke about.
yes,
I think he's mid 70s now. Steve is mid 70s. But this field would not be where it is if it weren't for those people.
it is.
And I mean, I can't, it's not the young trainer's fault, right?
Yeah. So I want to ask you about CrossFit.
Yes.
CrossFit is a phenomenon where now it's a commercialized exercise competition kind of sometimes space where there's lots of kettlebells and rings and
Yes.
bars, clubs, and all kinds of different things, sandbags. Um, but it doesn't feel like play.
No, it
So
doesn't.
we used to do that in my earlier 20s, post college sports. It was a good fit for me at the time, but it it is work. It's not play. There's no creativity there.
Yeah.
So how do you because I really what I'm trying to get at is I see what you're doing in your field is it's kind of pioneering like a further evolution beyond this work exercise method into a more open, aware, curious, playful, flowy kind of movement practice that I think is actually much healthier for most people.
I agree with you. Dan, did you know I owned the first CrossFit in Philly?
Just nuggets of information. Just
I know. I owned it. It was in Mount Airy. It was called CrossFit Philly. That is one of the domain names that I still have, by the way. Yeah. Now I sold the business to my partner at the time. Her name is Pam. She runs it. She changed the name to Urban Athlete, but it's right on Germantown Avenue in Mount Airy. Yeah. We were the first CrossFit in Philadelphia. I think we were like the 19th affiliate, and the affiliation fees were like $200 a year. I don't know what they were, but we had the rings and we had the pull-up bars on the chains like Steve. So we had all that kettlebells. We had all the kettlebells. Um, but yeah, it's interesting, Dan, that you bring that up because the play-based, the creative stuff. Around that time, there was a gentleman. His name is Tim. He's a mentor of mine, Frank Ferencic. I'm not sure if you've ever heard. He had a brand. I think he's rebranded. It was called Exuberant Animal, and his first book was "Play as if your life depends on it." And he has Exuberant Animal is another title of his. I can send you those links. But within Frank's work, he talks a lot about this. Like most of us, at least in industrialized America, we're overworked,
Yes.
right? We're overworked. My poor wife sometimes works 12-hour days. And then to go get her to work out, right? Oh, I know you just did all this labor and this emotional labor and this and that. Let's go train really hard. No, but it's an ironically, and I don't understand it. And many people in our field don't understand it. It's actually tougher to sell and grow a business based off of a creative, playful approach than it is an exercise work related approach.
Why do you think that is?
I think the exercise industry, the industrial complex of exercise, is better at marketing, at presenting certain things. Um, and I think people unfortunately like metrics. Like, and I know metrics are important. I'm not saying metrics are not important, but humans are well beyond metrics in many like we are intangibles. We are things that you can't necessarily measure, right? Like relationships aren't something that you can measure and weigh and track and graph over a 6-week period, right? In our movement practice, it should be, if we want deeper connections with the environment and with other humans, not be metric based. It should be connection. It should be artistic. It should be playful. It should be community based. But I think I'm going to use a strong word here, Dan, brainwashed. I think we have been brainwashed into thinking that if we don't apply ourselves to those metrics, that we will not receive any benefits. I just read a great report on racket sports and for longevity associated with racket sports. And then I think it was an American study, and then the Danes did another study, and they attribute the longevity of racket sports with the social aspect.
Yes.
Like, and you'll see this in the gym all the time. I teach at a very large facility here in our area. There's no social connection. Like people come in with their headphones on and won't even make eye contact with other people in the room. They don't want to be bothered here. They don't want to be bothered here. No, leave me alone. I'm going to come in and do that my shit and I'm going to leave. There's no social connection. So these Danish researchers, and you and I know this, if you study the blue zones, we can go down that hole. It's all social connection. It's all community. It's all togetherness. And the Danish researchers with the pickleball, like at that place where I teach, I won't mention names, there's a pickleball community. There's a whole community just revolving around getting together on Sunday at noon. And they look for one another. And if Dan doesn't show up, yo, Dan, you good? What's up? You know, I got wrapped up in this or whatever. So they look out for one another. And I don't know. I think the fitness industry, and it is industrial. I mean, how much money does the fitness industry make? Right.
Oh, billions,
Does
billions. I think this is absolutely dead on what you're saying about the need for connection, community. I've seen similar studies with longevity and racket sports was in that as well, along
Yep.
with other social things like skiing,
Yep.
uh, outdoor immersion combined with joint loading, um, cardio movement, energy cultivation. So I mean, totally. And I think this might even be one of the reasons CrossFit had such a nice run. I don't know if it's over, but the
Yes.
community aspect, I think, was the magic piece ingredient
Without a doubt. Yeah. You got it.
for Berlin, right?
Because nobody, Dan, nobody is going to do that workout if it did not revolve around doing that workout next to 10 other people suffering, right?
I think there are some masochist types that have CrossFit gyms in their own house and do these alone, but I don't think they last long.
God bless them. Can you imagine doing like Fran is the pull-ups with the thrusters?
Right.
Like who looks forward to that? I really need to get my Fran time down. Let me go into my garage and do this. It's just, I'm sorry, it's not pleasurable. It's
I
not.
can get the data in my watch. I want it to record the heart rate.
Yeah. I got to get those metrics. And metrics are important, but I don't know. Yeah, you really, that is it, Dan. You got it. It's the community. What box do you train out of? Right?
Right. We need it. I mean, we humanly need it.
It's true.
No, no, your identification of that is like a racquetball phenomenon. Totally. Like, just look at the pickleball growth. I mean, it's astronomical.
The place where I teach, they actually got rid of the basketball courts and created pickleball courts. And the people that play the pickleball, I know there are some younger folks, but they're older adults mostly that are looking for things like connection and community and other people and conversation. And it's the younger people in their 30s, 20s that have the headphones on. Look, I'm a little antisocial too. I don't mind. I can go train and be completely silent and not talk to anybody. But at some point, you need to hang out with other people too, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, we're towards the end here. I want to respect your time and just wanted to have you mention where can people find you and learn more about your work, because I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I wanted to highlight that.
Thank you very much. If you just Google Jason C. Brown, I use my middle initial, Jason C. Brown, and my website would be jasoncbrown.art, A-R-T. The .com was taken and somebody went to charge me $4,000 for the .com, and I would not pay them $4,000 for the .com. So jasoncbrown.art. I am Iron Kimono on Instagram. They can find me there. I have links to all my work on that social media as well. I am on YouTube under just Google, again, search for Jason C. Brown, and a lot of my play work will show up, and my workshop videos will show up there as well.
Awesome. I really encourage anybody who wants to get more creative in their movement practice, in their life, even in their work and relationships, to check out Jason's work and connect with you. I had a great experience in that Qigong seminar online. I learned a lot. So I want to let people know this is great stuff, and really thank you again for your time today.
Thanks for having me on, Dan. Appreciate the love, sir.
Awesome. Talk soon.
All right, sir. Thank you.
I hope this show helps us all access our highest potential. You can learn more about my work as a yoga therapist at flowstateyogatherapy.com or on social media at flowstateyogatherapy. You can also email me at flowstateyogatherapy@gmail.com. I look forward to connecting with you all. I hope you find an interesting nugget in this episode. I hope you share this with a friend, and I hope you reach out to me with feedback. It is valuable. Thank you again, and enjoy the journey.